The Australian dream is on the brink of collapse. Not long ago, owning a detached house on a quarter-acre block embodied prosperity for generations of Australians. Yet this dream is now threatened by skyrocketing property prices, stagnant wages, and fierce competition for rentals. The median cost of a house in Australia almost doubled between 2011 and 2024, leaving many first-time buyers locked out of the market. This video explores how one of the world's wealthiest nations found itself in a housing crisis that shapes its economy and its people's way of life. Australia is roughly the size of the continental United States, yet its population is concentrated in 5 large cities, most notably Sydney and Melbourne, which together account for 40% of the nation's inhabitants. During the 1950s, Australia enjoyed a booming economy, driven by abundant natural resources and strong post-war growth. This era popularized the Great Australian Dream, owning a standalone home in the suburbs with enough space for both a family and a car. Government policies like the First Home Owner Grant further fueled homeownership, driving rates from 52% in 1950 to a peak of 71% by 1968. In those decades, housing remained affordable and disadvantaged neighborhoods were relatively few. But in more recent years, the housing market has flipped. Sydney, Melbourne, and Adelaide now rank among the 10 least affordable cities worldwide, with house prices exceeding 10 times the annual household income. This unaffordability has forced more Australians to rent, triggering unprecedented demand and rent hikes. The current housing crisis traces back to significant policy shifts in the 1980s. During this period, housing evolved from a fundamental right into a profitable investment asset. Government measures such as negative gearing and capital gains tax discounts incentivized people to purchase additional properties, intensifying competition and driving up prices. Critics, especially on the political left, argue that these policies distorted the market and worsened inequality. In recent years, plummeting interest rates contributed to the problem. Leading into the COVID-19 pandemic, the Reserve Bank of Australia lowered rates close to zero, making it easier for borrowers to secure loans. This influx of capital inflated house values further as more buyers entered an already tight market. Meanwhile, federal and state governments implemented various grants to help low and middle income families become homeowners. While well-intentioned, these grants inadvertently boosted demand, once again driving up prices. On the supply side, government-sponsored public housing has been in steep decline, plummeting from around 20,000 new units built in 1978 to just 3,000 in 2023. This shortage leaves low-income earners and those on social benefits particularly vulnerable. For the private sector, restrictive zoning laws and local protests further dense developments. Commonly referred to as "not in my backyard" sentiment, further stifle new construction. Although Australia's geographical expanse might suggest ample land, extensive red tape and community resistance limit how quickly new homes can be built in the most desirable urban areas. The challenges do not stop there. After pandemic-era border closures, Australia reopened, welcoming record number of immigrants. Net overseas migration, which fell to about 25,000 during 2021, rose dramatically, reaching an all-time high by September 2023. This influx adds another layer of pressure on the rental market, especially as newly arrived residents typically rent. Unfortunately, it coincided with a construction slowdown exacerbated by rising costs of labor and materials. Building a home became 40% more expensive than before the pandemic, and projects often took 18% longer to complete. The immediate impact of the crisis is visible in the ever-growing lines of prospective tenants at rental inspections. Real estate agents report that dozens, sometimes hundreds of applicants vie for a single available unit, and some properties even lack basic amenities like power or complete bathrooms. Stories have emerged of landlords offering shipping containers or verandas for rent at inflated prices, reflecting the desperation in some localities. Although these examples may be extreme, they highlight how dire the market has become for average Australians. Today, a full-time worker on minimum wage spends around 68% of their earnings on rent, leaving little for other necessities. Meanwhile, 5 consecutive quarters of shrinking GDP per capita and rising costs of living have many Australians feeling the pinch. This economic uncertainty also intersects with immigration policy, becoming a hot-button issue ahead of the 2025 election. While welcoming skilled migrants can fill workforce gaps, critics say it also inflates housing demand in an already strained market. The crisis stretches far beyond real estate. As housing consumes more of the family's income, consumer spending declines, which in turn slows economic growth. The long-standing reliance on property values as a primary means of wealth accumulation has also contributed to income inequality. Those who own multiple properties see their assets appreciate while renters struggle to pay monthly bills. In effect, the lucky country faces a growing divide between property owners and everyone else. Further compounding the issue is the decades-long surge in overall housing values. Adjusted for inflation, Australia's main city house prices soared more than fourfold between 1971 and 2024, according to data compiled from the Real Estate Institute of Australia. Over the same period, wage growth failed to keep pace, squeezing household budgets and forcing many to rely on multiple jobs. Meanwhile, rent spikes have become ubiquitous, with the median rent in Sydney surpassing $3,000 per month, while Melbourne and Brisbane trail close behind. In numerous suburbs, prospective tenants attend inspections only to find queues stretching down the street, a stark illustration of demand outpacing supply. These pressures converge to create a cost of living crunch, where Australians often choose between housing expenses and essentials like groceries or utilities. The consequence is a diminishing sense of security for renters and homeowners alike, eroding the promise of stable advancement once at the heart of Australia's national narrative. Australia's predicament raises pressing questions about the long-term viability of viewing housing as an investment rather than a necessity. The great Australian dream, once a bedrock of national identity, risks fading into myth for younger generations. On the flip side, Australia's experience is emblematic of a broader global challenge, where property markets in many nations, from Canada to the United Kingdom, suffer parallel strains. If left unresolved, the crisis might leave a generational scar that continues to widen social and economic gaps. History shows that housing affordability often returns as a central concern during periods of political transition. And with the next election approaching, debates are sure to intensify. The question remains whether the bold policy changes needed, such as easing planning restrictions, boosting social housing, or reforming tax incentives, can muster enough bipartisan support to break the cycle. If this issue resonates, consider engaging in the conversation about housing reforms. Seek out local forums, discuss policies with community representatives, or explore credible publications for fresh perspectives. Share this video, subscribe to our channel, and join us next time as we continue to shine a light on the pivotal economic stories shaping our world every day.